Oh, scheiße.
Hello and welcome to this edition of Conscious Living Radio, what I'm calling the Spirit Plant Medicine edition. My name is Marc Caron, and we air every Wednesday at 6 p.m. on 100.5 FM here in Vancouver, Co-op Radio. And today I am here with my special friend and host of the Spirit Plant Medicine Conference, Stephen Gray, and we have another featured presenter as our guest. And I'm going to pass it over right now to Stephen to introduce our guest today.
Well, folks, welcome. And unless you are only listening to this, you are also looking at Chad Charles with a chemical diagram of the medicine that his primary medicine that he works with. So I'm going to read you part or most of the bio from our Spirit Plant Medicine Conference website. You can go back and look at it again. And there's one paragraph I left out just for efficiency purposes, time. But I'm going to read that to you, and then we're going to get into some questions. Excuse me. Since 2016, Chad has immersed himself intensively in the world of therapy, psychedelic and somatic, neo-shamanism, psychonautism, naturalistic studies, conference trainings, and retreats, all related to Bufo Alvarius and/or 5-MeO-DMT, as well as associated with an entourage of conscientious peers, mentors, guides, and teachers in the specific field of this medicine. Chad has spoken at the World Bufo Alvarius Congress, participates in the Psychedelic Societies of Ottawa, Vancouver, Toronto, and Berlin, as well as the Psychedelic Leadership Summit. He's also been featured on the Entheogenic Evolution and Adventures Through the Mind podcasts, as well as Forbes magazine. Chad has a private practice in Montreal where he guides participants in one-on-one sessions. He also leads transformational retreats globally that merge the numinous experiences available with conscious connected breath work and the surrender of 5-MeO-DMT, what he calls the breath of fire, or the breath of five. He has put his website publicly on our website, so I'm sure he won't mind if I tell you that too. And Marc, maybe we'll put that up as a tab later.
It's already in the post below if you're watching on Facebook.
I can't even keep up with you, Marc. So it's chadcharles.net/breath of five. And the password is 1, if that's still appropriate, Chad. Yeah, good.
And that's there too.
Yeah. Oh, cool, Marc. You're good. So let's get right into it, Chad. This is a fascinating medicine, and you're doing some remarkable work with it. You're very involved in both the direct work, of sessions with people, but also helping steward this medicine forward safely and effectively. And frankly, I think this is a medicine, well, any of the major psychedelics need that careful stewardship, but 5-MeO is almost in a league of its own because of the fact that it sort of potentially, skips, everything from B after A and takes you directly to Z or Z, maybe we'd just start by asking you, for those that don't know, and I'm sure there are a lot, what is 5-MeO-DMT?
Sure. Yeah, let's start with the basics.
Mm-hmm.
So 5-MeO-DMT, 5-methoxydimethyltryptamine, is a molecule, sometimes dubbed the God molecule, that apparently, I don't know if this has been totally proven yet, is produced endogenously or internally in the human body. However, it is also found in all kinds of plants around the world, as well as one particular unique species of toad that's endemic to the Sonoran Desert here in North America. And of course, it can also be synthesized in a laboratory. So the molecule itself apparently is, again, natural in the sense that the body produces it, supposedly. And then when we take it exogenously, there's a further activation, as I imagine that there is a super dosage. There's something that the body is taking on that it might be familiar with, yet not at certain quantities. So that molecule is, to me, a sort of agent that reveals, for I don't know what other word to use, there are many other words and there are no words, the energy, the felt sensation, the direct experience of source. And what I mean by source is somehow this is aligned with what we might also call non-duality. And the state of non-duality, of course, is a singularity where there's no pluralism, there's no duality, and there's a potential peak experience when taking this medicine on that reveals that. And yet there's so much else that goes on even when the potential peak experience doesn't occur. The experience itself is totally unpredictable in my experience. Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to have to dive into, that kind of opens in my mind a Pandora's box of questions about
I
this
know.
substance, just because it's so powerful, and short acting as well. I must not forget to ask the deeper questions, but I want to do a couple of the more, prosaic or basic, as you say, questions first. Like, for example, what is the difference between, or is there any significant or meaningful difference between the synthesized version and that directly from the toad?
Mm. Well, I would add also that there's the possibility to extract it from plants. So
Mm.
there's basically three different ways that we might take this. We might, or make it, there's synthesizing it by putting together different atoms, combining them to make the molecule. It's found in the secretion of the Sonoran desert toad. And then, of course, it can also be found in other plants that we might ingest in different ways. And then it would also be possible to extract the molecule from different plants.
Hmm.
So the difference between all taking them, there's so many factors involved. A lot of the factors might be the mode of delivery. So with the secretion of the Bufo alvarius, so Bufo alvarius being the taxonomical name, or the Sonoran desert toad, is that you take the what's called a bufotoxin, the secretion, and combust it, and you inhale the vapor of the smoke. And in that vapor is this molecule, 5-MeO-DMT, plus other things. Of course, it's an organic substance that comes directly from the toad, and it doesn't need to be altered in any way. Now, you could also take the pure molecule, and when I say pure, I mean to say that it's just the molecule. It's purely the molecule. There's nothing else on the side of it. It may be, hopefully 99.9% pure. And that can be brought into the body in a variety of ways. And perhaps in the earliest times of its usage, it was done so by insufflating it or taking it through the nose. And then probably this medicine has been found in many different plants in many different arrangements throughout the course of time. And one of maybe the more known ones would be different snuffs coming out of the Amazon basin, where this is also brought in through the nose. But of course, there's lots of other things, and typically the yield or the dosage of the molecule, this molecule, is not as high as it would be if you were to take it purely or with the toad and inhaled it. And in the secretion of the Sonoran desert toad is found quite a high percentage of the molecule in that secretion. Now, very quickly, just to wrap all that up, at the peak of the experience, the potential peak of the experience, the potential fullest expression of what can ultimately and absolutely happen, is a place of, which isn't a place of singularity. And in my mind and in my experience, once that is revealed fully and absolutely, it doesn't matter how you got there. It doesn't matter what you took to get there. And so then, in other words, whether you've ingested somehow the pure molecule or you've inhaled the smoke from the Bufo alvarius, at the fullest expression of that experience, in my mind, there is no difference. because
Perfect.
when we're merged completely with the all and the one
Hmm.
and the everything and the nothing, um, it's all the same.
Beautiful. Okay, so we have to ask you, I want to save this one though. We have to ask you about how that integrates back into life because it's so dramatic, it's so radical. But before that, leading to that, perhaps that question, perhaps you could take us through or take the viewers through your protocol. For example, are you what would you call it? I was going to say aficionado, or do you follow this? What do you call it? The handshake, a hug, and embrace kind of approach.
Mm,
Sure. So maybe go through your protocol with people.
sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, before we even come into a session, and I work primarily one-on-one in a psychotherapeutic session. I also do group work within a retreat context, but I'll leave that aside for now. And before we even come into a session, I'm getting a wealth of information from somebody, a broad spectrum of their past history with other substances, their social network and resources, past traumatic history, et cetera, et cetera. It's actually quite a lengthy. A lot of people get back to me and say, "Well, that was medicine in and of itself, just filling out your intake form."
One,
And then,
one
yeah,
question,
Marc,
like before you answer Stephen's question and you go into that, because what I'm curious is, what are people using 5-MeO for?
great,
You know what?
yeah,
Because you can go into a session and that's great, but why am I even going to a session with you in the
why?
first place, right? What
Thank
am I
you.
looking to achieve or transform in my life?
Beautiful. People come to me and people come to this experience for a wide variety of reasons, as far as I can tell. One, it might be out of pure curiosity and discovery. Maybe it's self-discovery. Maybe it's self-discovery that was a little unintended because we thought that this was about something else. And then we realize, oh, this whole experience was about me. Some people come into this experience because I hold this in a more therapeutic setting. They're looking for resolution for trauma. They're looking at improving the quality of their life, of their present moment awareness. And there is there's a grand variety of why people come to this, and I listen to all of that, and I don't really have a target audience, so to speak, because this isn't not for somebody. It's for everybody because this experience is always there. It's already there. It's not coming from without us. It's already within us. It is us. And
Hmm.
so the only thing that I'm looking for, regardless of somebody's intention of what they want for themselves, is this an appropriate time in their life? Because
Hmm.
it will have an impact. And so rather than sandwiching in an experience with God between a shift at work and dinner with mom, what I'd like to do is make sure that somebody is giving this experience the maximum potential that they might, and that is spaciousness,
Hmm.
taking time um, to let this be, let this settle. Yeah.
So that's your sort of intake process, and then next steps.
So when people come in, well, we have about a half hour Zoom call just to connect and talk about some of those answers. What's going on for you? Maybe I have some concerns. I want to give that person the opportunity to get a feel for me so that they have a yes for not only this experience, but for working with me. Because ultimately, this is about trust. And trust is required for surrender. And surrender is kind of the name of the game with this medicine. Now, when they come into the experience, I don't have a protocol or a template cookie cutter way of working with people because I'm adapting to their nervous system. I'm adapting to their capacity to self regulate. I'm adjusting to what feels right for them in the moment. And so I make a plan with them rather than give them the plan of how this is going to work. So sometimes I work in a psycholytic fashion where we're incrementally going up from very, very small doses to a place where perhaps we've met a threshold of what this person's nervous system can actually handle. So working up towards what Ralph Metzner might have called the dissociative dose, the DD. But sometimes I'll also work in a way where what this person needs is a shakeup. They need a like this. They're probably not going to receive the small doses very well, at least not in one session. So if somebody's only committing to one session, number one, that might raise a red flag for me in working with them. Yet I don't deny the benefit of blowing one's mind. And that might want to happen in one session. Yeah. But that's not the agenda. It's just a possibility. Mm-hmm. In the end, whatever way I'm working with, incrementally or one shot, I'm basically looking at, is this an approach of surrender or an approach of submission? And those are my parameters. Those are the realms in which I have my eye on when I'm working with an individual.
So what's the difference between surrender and submission then?
Yeah.
Perfect. That was my question too.
Yeah.
No, it wasn't. It was mine. It was all three of us.
Well, this idea of the difference between surrender and submission actually came from, I did a tour of the Middle East a couple of years ago with this experience. And I have a lot of experience in the Middle East, and I've always been fascinated by the word Islam. And Islam essentially means, in English, either surrender or submission. They kind of, it's like, well, which one is it? And what does it mean to an Arabic speaker? And so I was learning about this, and how does that translate into English, and what difference does it make? And as I was offering this experience to people, I realized that there is an opportunity for a surrender, and there's also an opportunity to submit. And when we submit to something, typically we allow ourselves, or we are overwhelmed by a force that is coming on to us, from outside of us, an external circumstance. And so to submit to that is somehow without choice. It's like where you're just like, all I could do was submit to that force. And yet surrender, seemingly the same thing, yet I associate, or I create a connotation with surrender that has to do with an element of consciousness, a conscious surrender, as in there's a choice being made. Yes, I surrender to this force that's coming on. I'm not being overwhelmed by it. I have a yes for it. I'm allowing it to happen. I'm accepting and dissolving into it. And so there's a difference there in approach. And it kind of goes to the different dosing protocols that I use, that blowing one's mind all in one shot. It might be a submission approach where the idea is indeed to offer enough of an amount of this molecule where this person has no choice but to submit to it. Sometimes that is very beneficial, and sometimes that in and of itself is traumatic. The surrender approach is the one that I favor and I work with most often, because I notice over time with clients that they feel more empowered because they made the choice to surrender somehow.
That was the word I was going to. Yeah, that was the word I was going to use. That the surrender sounds more like taking personal responsibility and self-empowerment. Right. Submitting is more like voting for Donald Trump. Without thinking.
Let's keep politics out of this, gentlemen.
This is spiritual. Now. This is a spiritual issue. Yeah. So. Okay. So maybe you have more to say about that, but maybe I'll go into this next thing that I'm very curious about with this medicine, because I've taken it 3-4 times, and 2 of those I would say I had the non-dual experience, as far as I can tell, the words that ushered forth spontaneously from my lips immediately after both experience was, oh my God. And I do not use that OMG term in my normal life. I meant it, you know, like, oh my God, right? The first time I did it, both times with one-on-one guide situation, I said to her, this is what I've been waiting my whole life to know. But here's the tricky part of this from my point of view. This was, both these experiences were, I don't know, one was about a year ago and the other one was about 6 months ago. I have no idea how that has informed my life. I really don't. Mind you, I'm 71 years old and I've experienced a lot of practices in medicine, so it's not like, we have a control group here exactly, if you know what I mean. So, so the question in that, and actually I'm going to use this little aphorism as well, or teaching, so to speak, as a lead-in for you. You're probably familiar with the religious historian Houston Smith.
Not very familiar, but I know the name and I know where that's coming from. Yes.
Yeah, he was well known in his time. I think he's either very old or passed away now. But I think his textbook on world religions was in every university at one point, and he was also quite familiar with the psychedelics. And he said two things about that have sort of stayed in the literature. One is, it's clear that psychedelics can produce a religious experience, much less clear they can produce a religious life, or you might say spiritual life. But the other one, that's my lead-in question for you, is that he said, and I don't know the exact words on this one, just the gist. He said, what's more important is altered traits rather than altered states. So my question is, again, tying that in with the fact that I have no idea, quite honestly, quite humbly, I have no idea how those experiences have informed my life. How do they inform your life? I mean, how do you bring that back? It's so, like, pardon me for rambling a bit, but I'll just use this analogy too, and then let you go with it. You could say that meditation maybe is walking, and then you kind of go up from there, right? Like cannabis is maybe riding a bicycle, to the goal, so to speak. And then you get into, psilocybin, ayahuasca, which are, perhaps hopping in a jet plane to get to the destination. And then 5-MeO is kind of like beam me up, Scotty. There's no in between, right? So how do you don't see the landscape along the way. And you were talking earlier about how, some people have trauma they need to process. I mean, how, if you just have that experience of non-duality, how are you processing that, and how do you bring it back into your life?
There's a lot there. I really love the altered traits as opposed to altered states. That's so true. What's true about it for me is that what I've noticed in myself and in others is that we have the capacity to take any experience that seems to be objectively profound and impactful, take it, check off the list on our to-do sheet, put it on the dusty bookshelf with the rest of the DVDs we'll never watch again, and continue on. We have that capacity. No matter what experience, somehow we can just deflect it, ignore it, put it aside, as in like, yeah, that was an experience. And that's okay. That alone is not very harmful. It's kind of harmless, but how can we get the most out of that impact? How can it have a lasting impact is what I'm hearing from you. And it is, how can it change the way that we live, behave, act, and carry forward in our lives? And it probably starts with habits, changing patterns, etc. And most of that has to do with internal work. The very least, I expect an impact such as is possible with a non-dual experience or any other experience that's happening with the God molecule or 5-MeO DMT. Number one, to have an impact, you have to have a plan. So what I like to say, and I think this is on my website, is that the state itself is an experience of self-realization, but self-actualization is not included. Self-actualization is what happens after that period or that state of self-realization. And how do we do that? I assist people in doing just that by simply what I call tracking. This isn't something original for me, but it's what I'm doing. And what I find interesting, and why and how I work with this in a more therapeutic manner, which is very body-based, very trauma-informed and somatically informed, is that no matter if the peak experience was revealed or arrived at or reached as if it was a destination, it doesn't need to be that, but sometimes it is. In any case, after whatever peak that has been achieved, there is a reassembly of the egoic structure. Now, as that the fragmented aspects of self are coming into a more cohesive form, there are phenomena that are appearing on the radar of the self-identifier's screen, right? They could be thinking and feeling a million different things, but they're not. They're having this particular thought, they're feeling this particular emotion, they're feeling this sensation in their body. And for me, that is precious. You're feeling what in your left hip? Okay, let's have a look at that. What other sensations are there? What are you thinking? What is your mind saying in that moment? Okay, let's piece some things together as the proverbial snow globe comes back into stillness and all those particles reconfigure in a totally new mosaic. And as we start to track the different somatic, affective, and cognitive aspects of the reformation of I, that's juicy. That's the gold that we can extract. And as we identify this track, and then this track, and then this track, and then this track, very soon, there's a path that is being created. And that path won't end at the end of our session. That's just the beginning. Or a continuation, and the path has simply been accelerated at that point. And if somebody can just track those places with us with a coherent, non-altered state of consciousness, which is me as the person, their guide, their witness to what's happening, is like, let's trust this. Let's trust that. Maybe it seems random or out of place. I don't know. I don't know why my right leg is doing that. I'm not really sure. I'm not sure why I just suddenly thought about that particular thing. Not so random. Juicy. Let's go for it. And by the end of their session, there is a plan. There is a direction. There's a trajectory that at least at that very moment, I can point them in that direction. Now, if they want to have ongoing support, beautiful. If that's all the direction and acceleration of their path that they needed, beautiful. I trust that as well.
Nicely put. Well done. Because I was going to ask you about the follow-up, but here's a really provocative question, and I, to be honest, I'm a little bit ambivalent about asking it because I don't want to put thoughts in people's heads that might trigger fears or anything like that. But
oh my God, I'm so curious. Spill it.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah. So well, I have to give you a little preamble on this. There's a psychic that I worked with, or that I did a couple of sessions with way back in the 80s. And this is another theme that Marc and I and some others have been talking about lately, is that when things come up in your mind these days, it seems like they're being empowered more. It's like, follow that, right? So after 30 years, this guy, Kit Wilkins, his name popped up in my mind a few times this past week. And I thought, I'm just going to call him and see if he's still alive and still around. And sure enough, I found this name, Kit Wilkins, on the internet, and he's still doing it, and we're going to have a session on Saturday. But I told him that some things had come up for me and that I've been working with psychedelics and so on, and he's really opposed to psychedelics, and he's not the only one that I've heard say this. The other person, actually one other person, and they're both psychics. And what he says is that you're breaking the protective aura around you when you do these things. And vampire or sucking like, energies can come in and attack you in that sense. This is why I was a little ambivalent to bring it up, because I don't want to put fears into people's heads. But so I'm not sure exactly what the question is, but it kind of threw me for a loop when he said that, because he is a powerful psychic. He told me that he could walk into a bar, and when people have had a number of drinks, this is alcohol we're talking about now, obviously. He said he could see these little jellyfish-like things kind of hovering around them, like wanting to get into their space. So I guess I'm asking, have you seen anything like that? Are there ways that you have to protect against that, or is it just somebody who happens to notice the dark side and not the light very well, and focuses on that?
I can appreciate the precursor of a certain ambivalence here, and because how that shows up for me as I aim to respond is a place of almost controversy in a way that comes to mind. Reminds me of an article I wrote on my blog called "A Story Beyond Story," and right away I'm brought to this particular molecule, because you could ask that question to a practitioner of multiple different psychedelic substances, and yet this particular molecule, in my estimation, is functioning in a very unique way. Very late, unfortunately, James Orrock, who wrote The Tryptamine Palace, the way that he described how this is functioning is that energetically it's functioning at the crown. Most other things, especially other tryptamines, mescaline, even LSD, are functioning at the sixth energy center, where we're able to, in separation still, perceive so many other things that are going on beyond this 3D, right? The multidimensionality of existence. Now, when a medicine is functioning up here, it's going beyond, not to say that it's better or worse. I don't look at this very in a lateral way. However, beyond that, there is the source of all dimensionality. And at that source, there's nothing, there's no jellyfish to be seen. You are the jellyfish. The jellyfish are you. It's the source of all of that. Now, that being said, and I developed this idea with a larger metaphor that I call Shushumna Tower, but I won't do that here for the sake of time. But what I will say is that what I've noticed is that practitioners come to work with this medicine using a paradigm, belief systems, a perspective that are not aligned with its functionality. In my mind, the function, the design of the God molecule is for this to be revealed. It operates here, not within the physical body, but within the energetic body. That's why we feel it. We feel something. And on the way there, which this here is very impersonal, right? The non-dual is very impersonal. But on our way there is very personal as we swath through the layers of self in order for the capital S self to be revealed. Now, as we go up, the container, the space and the time, the set and the setting, and the paradigm and perspective that has informed all of that by the practitioner or the person self-using, I think plays a very important role in what I'd call a tight container. And I do this because I'm thinking of a shaft that goes straight up to the crown from the ground that is solid and airtight, energetically tight. Now, when somebody's working at that process, perhaps they're the neo-shaman who's, been to a lot of, peyote or ayahuasca sessions, and they think this is all happening here. And this is how they're working with their client or the participant here. Then I do think that it can be corrupted in a sense, because they're missing the function of it. It's not functioning here. And so when that happens, that interference, I think there's the possibility of energetically that chiseling into an otherwise tight experience that could be only happening here. I'll just stop there and see how that sits.
Yeah, that's fascinating because yeah, sure, Mark. Let me just ask this one though, before we get off this theme, if you don't mind, Mark. Thanks. I used to go to quite a few Native American church peyote ceremonies, and they hold a fabulous tight container. And I've been told by some of the elders there that they never have, negative spirits or hungry ghost spirits come in. The Santo Daime people actually, in some of their works, invite them in for healing, but that's another issue. And the rest of the time, they also keep a tight container. Yeah, it does really seem to make a difference. So the next question is going to take some time. So maybe I better let Marc ask that question first.
Well, first off, Chad, I loved your answer. I think that was fantastic because, we see just in this world that the differences of, and I'm even going to say almost different opinions from different practitioners because of, what they're saying about, don't mix this with that. And, so I think part of it, it's about really a person doing their own due diligence. And we've seen, the positive results with a lot of people in using, these medicines for transformation. Now, we do have a Facebook watcher who has a question, and I thought it was somewhat applicable to the same thing, yet a little bit different. And Jack Hubley asks on Facebook Live right now, I would love to hear your thoughts on whether you've experienced patients or users having full blockages from full breakthroughs or positive trips, in a sense that it feels like immediately positive during and after, rather than being a negative experience. And then a negative experience that actually turns out to be positive later.
Okay. I mean, I think it sounded like a long-winded way to ask. How do you turn a bad experience into a good one?
You could pick that side out of it.
Yeah, pretty much. But some people always go in and have a great experience, and then some people don't, and then later it really kind of connects with them, right?
I mean, this is a basic, harm reduction question that could be applied to just about, any substance. Basically, the question that I would have as a simple response is, what is a negative experience? What is a positive experience? The experience is, and you will judge it as you will. Mm-hmm. So, and I'll lean into this little nugget of wisdom that I've been chewing on for years, is that everything will be okay as soon as you're okay with everything.
Whoa, beautiful. Yeah.
It's so simple, and yet that's brutally honest.
Yeah.
Why is it negative? Because you didn't like it?
Yeah.
What didn't you like? Yeah. Well, my idea of how this particular molecule is working is that this is the biggest and clearest mirror that you will ever look into. There's no blind spots. There's nothing to hide. And it's going to get closer and closer and closer, and there's no turning away. And if there's something there that you don't like, it's nothing but yourself. You're experiencing yourself.
Beautiful. And that goes into, just the fact that as human beings, we're meaning makers, right? We're always looking to make meaning to everything. And one of the schools of thought that I learned many years ago and kind of rings true in some instances, nothing has any meaning but the meaning we give it. So when we take a look at the happening or the experience, we put our own meaning on it, whether it's positive, negative, transformative, or whatever it might be. We are the ones who create that meaning for ourselves, because we can all experience the exact same thing and give it a completely different meaning, which changes our emotions, our biochemistry, our state, everything, right?
I totally agree with you, Marc. Yeah.
And yet, I'm not sure if this is really disagreeing with that, but a different slant on it maybe, as my old Buddhist teacher once said, there is a whole world beyond your mind. In other words, there is something you might call objective reality or eternal reality out there. And speaking of Buddhism, that was one of what you were saying about, excuse me, a moment ago about, that whole theme that we were just talking about. They have a saying called, or a teaching or whatever, called the lion's roar. It's the fearless proclamation that any state of mind is workable, basically. Yeah. So, talking about, I had wanted to ask this question anyway, but you've also kind of set it up by making 2 or 3 references to misunderstandings that a number of practitioners may have as they come into work with this based on their work with other medicines.
And that's my opinion.
Okay.
That's my opinion. Yeah.
Sure. Nonetheless, correct me if I'm wrong, but I understand that a significant or other part of your work is with either an organization or more than one whose mission or mandate is to protect this work and keep it safe, keep it moving forward well, because my God, it's such a powerful, all the psychedelics are, but this one, it's like holding a ball of fire in your hands,
Yes.
So can you talk about that work?
Sure. I'm guessing that you're talking about an organization called the Conclave. Um,
Specifically, yeah.
yeah, and so I align my work with the work of the conclave, and basically what that means, I mean, there's no there's no above ground work with 5-MeO-DMT. It's not a controlled substance in this country, in Canada, and yet it's not explicitly legal. But then again, neither are carrots, but we eat them and it's okay. And um, and so there's no code, there's no order to belong to, there's no authority, there's no coming together for most of probably for almost everything that every person that you're talking to, say in this conference. And the conclave, despite that, exists in the below ground, so to speak, unofficial world of practice with this particular molecule, and it has created documentation that is meant to be inclusive, so that many different practitioners working with this molecule can find not necessarily a standard. I don't know if they use that word, but the best practices is which is one of their documents, and ethical commitments, so that there is not so much an authority, because I don't really feel an authority coming from that organization, but what I do honor about that is like, wow, this is beautiful. I have something that I can lean on. I have something that my peers that I probably don't even know, who are in service to this experience, have voluntarily just offered up, so that it's safe, the safe passage to this experience, to this revelation, to this realization, to this confirmation, can be ensured, if we care to trust that. And I do. And so I check my own practice according to these documents, because there is no, there is no other review process. I don't have a supervisor. I don't have somebody checking on my integrity. But what I've learned is that other practitioners who do, we have a body of work, a body of wisdom that is offered us, that we can use as a reflection for ourselves and just check in, like, oh, do I fit into that particular lens of ethics? Who wrote that? Who are these people? And does it mean that they think that I would not be in integrity if I did this? And it's my choice to apply that lens onto myself, and I do, because I trust it, and I think it is unique in the medicine world.
Would you say that are there particular points that you can share with us about what they say is integral, or applying integrity to your work or not?
Oh, let me try to think if I can find a personal anecdote. Because the documentation is large. It's quite comprehensive, I would say. Best documents alone is something like 18 pages. The ethical commitments are many pages. Here's what I think that would be really useful, maybe for your audience more than anything, is that there is a synopsis of the best practices that is really geared towards potential participants. Somebody who is thinking, there's a practitioner I've heard about, and I think I want this experience. But I'm not sure. And apparently there's different ways. There's surrender, there's submission, there's all these different ways. How do I know? How do I come into a place of trust with not only this experience, but in the dynamic that I'll have with the person offering it to me? The synopsis of the best practices offers a potential participant a series of questions that they might want to ask that practitioner, and that any practitioner who is working with integrity should have no problem answering. And it's available for free. You just go to their website, you download it, and it could be like, oh, I never thought of asking that. That's a great question. I should be asking that question because I want to be safe, and I want to make sure that this is right for me, or that the approach of this particular practitioner is something that would be beneficial for what's going on for me, which might be different than the other person.
Yeah, well said. Excuse me. So, what about, do you have any thoughts on the kind of training or prerequisites that not being too reductionist about it, but in a general sense, the kind of training, preparation, and prerequisites that ideally a practitioner should have before working with this medicine?
This is a juicy question. This is almost a polemic, I would say. Um, uh, I have a kind of a guidance program that I offer practitioners who are maybe new to this work, or want to have another peer kind of cast an eye on their own practice. And I mention that because almost with every single one of the people that come into my guidance program, I talk about what is their orientation. And what I mean by that is how are they coming at this experience, and why? So what I mean by that is, like, there might be a clinical approach, people doing research, and they might be, because they're doing research, they have a clinical approach, and then they have a method of delivery that's a certain way, and their criteria for who this is for would be a certain person. And so they're narrowing down what then would a skill set be required to do that. If somebody wants to have a therapeutic orientation, okay, what kind of therapy are we talking about? What do we want to do? What do we feel compelled to assist people in? Are we offering them a submission experience and then bye, we'll never see you again? Or are we into an ongoing, I want to help you actualize this non-dual perspective into a station of being, that your traits are going to be altered, my friend? Yes. Or are we going to have a more ceremonial, energetic, neo-shamanic approach where we might want to learn more about feathers and rattles, and maybe we need a certificate in rattling those things, and that would be the skill set that we need. So it's all based on what is the orientation that the practitioner wants, and it starts from there, because it's not all going to apply. If I go into body-based somatic Hakomi certificate, but if I'm doing like shamanic group work with 40 people that some practitioners might do, I don't know if that skill set's really going to be of any support to the people coming into my care. So there's no solid answer to that. But I will say this, that in my opinion, a responsible practitioner at the very least is seeking peership with others who have walked the path as a practitioner before them.
Good one.
Because the era and the epic and the paradigm of the lone wolf is only going to get us in further trouble. And when I say us, I mean those of us who are working with substances that
Mm-hmm.
are on the brink of becoming more in the collective consciousness and usage and benefit.
Well, beautifully put. Yeah, go ahead, Marc.
So it leads me to the question, um, is there any danger? And if so, what would they be in working with this particular medicine?
What would be the danger for who?
For the person using it, like contradictory
I
medications,
see.
is there
Yes.
deaths associated? Is there, what's that associates? So we've talked about some of the great stuff that can happen. Is there dangers associated with it, or
Sure.
perceived dangers?
Sure. Because there isn't a lot of research done on how this particular neurotransmitter, this tryptamine, operates in the body, we don't necessarily know, number one, how it interacts with other neurotransmitters and other agents that are injected into our neurobiology. So drug interaction is something that's really, a hot topic with not only this molecule, but with many others. And there's not a large body of knowledge there, but it's becoming increasingly known. To play it safe, don't mix it with anything else. And yet, that's not necessarily there's not an absolute or objective truth to that, because not all other agents or drugs operate in the same way. There's the umbrella of, say, SSRIs, but there's so many different kinds, and they have different half-lives, and it depends on the dosage, and there's so many factors that there's no one thing that could be dangerous. Now, the potential, the ultimate danger of using this is something called serotonin syndrome. And serotonin syndrome, again, I'm not a pharmacologist and I'm not a neuroscientist, so I'm probably either going to butcher this or this will be very incomplete. But it is potentially fatal. And it's something that has been known to happen when either there is a significant clash or drug interaction problem that's been having, or an incredibly unnecessarily high intake or dosage for the person. Other than that, this is a big experience. So anything related to the heart is going to be a sort of contraindication, because, I wouldn't want to have a heart condition and jump out of a plane, because there's so much happening in the body. I don't want to trip an already fragile system.
So that it leads me to another question, if I may, Stephen. When you're talking about the natural form bufo from the desert toad, is there, just to pre-frame it a little bit more, we know that there is a history with cannabis and San Pedro and peyote and ayahuasca and mushrooms throughout, thousands of years with the indigenous people. What's the history behind bufo, and maybe how it kind of got discovered that way?
Well, the earliest that we know was that in the early 80s, somebody, an American citizen, was either discovering or using the secretion of the Sonoran desert toad. And anything earlier than that, there's no actual proof, evidence, or record of its usage. There's lots of hints at that possibility, and we don't know. Generally, as we're speaking now in 2020, about 10 years ago, the usage of the secretion of the Sonoran desert toad was more or less popularized in Mexico by less than a handful of individuals who use the internet to kind of broadcast what's going on here. I call that the Mexican wave in terms of this medicine. And it really put this experience, it kind of, well, here we are talking about it. Whereas if that Mexican wave had not happened in the way that it did, maybe we wouldn't be talking about it in the same way that before the Mexican wave, nobody was really talking about it yet. people were using it. They might not have been using Bufo alvarius as much as the pure molecule, however, which saw usage earlier than the secretion of the Sonoran desert toad.
Interesting.
So, do we have any more time, Marc, or how are we
We've
doing
got a
here?
few minutes left. Yeah, about 7 minutes or so.
Okay, how about this one? How would you describe the difference between 5-MeO and just DMT itself?
Yes, good one. That was one of mine too.
Yeah, that's a popular one because, of course, yes, DMT. 99% of the time, it seems that we're talking about NN-DMT, not realizing that there are all kinds of DMTs. Psilocybin is a DMT, but we'll never call it that way, and we don't even think about it that way, and yet it is. And then with 5-MeO DMT, somehow, at least experientially, it is operating again in that different frame. This is even James Orrock's kind of scale of like, it's just functioning in a different pathway of the system. Whereas NN-DMT, and as far as I know, all the other dimethyltryptamines, are functioning at the visual energy center, where we are we're made aware of the different dimensions that are simultaneously occurring as if there was time and place anyway. But that's where it's happening. So we get to see things. We get to be apparently in another place. We're engaging with. There's as James would say, there's the goddesses and the demons and the heavens and the hells and the entities and but all of that is, I'm observing something else. I'm in duality. There's visuals. It's happening here. 5-MeO DMT does not operate there. It does not function there. Its design is elsewhere. It's at the place where there is nothing to be seen by virtue of becoming everything that could be seen, where everything and nothing is at one. This is samadhi, this is satori, this is all of the different words that have been used. And then there's even different qualifications of that. But where one and the other come into being, where there is no separation, there's nothing to see there.
There are no self-replicating machine elves.
Right.
That was a Terence
Right.
McKenna. Yeah.
That's right. I've seen them.
Yeah.
I've seen them.
Yeah.
The two experiences were completely different.
Yeah.
And it was interesting for me, the regular DMT, if we would call it that, or what most people associate. I know, sorry.
I know.
I use simple
regular
terms, right?
DMT,
But they call that the spirit molecule,
yes.
right? And then this one being the God molecule. You can really see the difference. But and to further what Stephen was saying, it was like there was parts of what, especially in that spirit molecules, I came out, it's like, okay, so how does that affect my like what the hell just happened? And how does that apply to my life?
Yes.
Right. So it was and with my 5-MeO experience, it was the oneness. It was I was dissolved into the light, and that was it. Right.
Yeah. So since we are, just about out of time, maybe you'd like to share perhaps one sort of anonymous, of course, but favorite experience that you've seen of somebody changing in a really good and lasting way that you've worked with from this medicine?
Ooh, well, there's been a lot. I've had the grand honor of working with 500-600 different individuals over the last years. Maybe I'll just go into like the most recent. I was having what I call my post-session calls today from recent appointments, recent sessions with people. I had 2 today. And one came in to her session like we all do, with a framework, with an understanding. I know how it all works. I know. I've been doing self and spiritual development work all my life, and I know how to move energy, and I know how to astral travel, and I know how to do all of the things. And so I'm open to this experience because I'm open to seeing new things, and I expect that this will be just a confirmation of everything that I already know. Beautiful. So attached to a set of beliefs.
Uh-huh.
The beauty of working with 5-MeO-DMT is that at the state of non-duality, at the point of singularity, there is no limit, there is no horizon, there is no box, there is no, it is infinite. And so when we come into that experience with a box, which is normal, I mean, we're human and we're defined by all kinds of things working within our dimension. And yet when we touch on the dimensionless, wow, that can really challenge the structure that we've been identifying with. And that can be very disruptive, even if it's gloriously, like Marc said, I went into the light and it's glorious and it's wonderful. And yet when we come back, we realize, wow, everything that I thought I knew, it's not that it's wrong, it's just that there's more. And so it will challenge what we think we know so that we can grow into something more. And that is that happens with any big experience, and that's a relative ego death. Now, at the point of singularity, the ego death is absolute. It's an absolute mystical experience. I dare say that. And so even ones with the most expanded consciousness, with an enormous scope of awareness, will meet the edge of that scope. They will meet the edge of the box that they didn't even know that they were identifying with. Wow. And there begins a grand adventure.
My God, I want to say, because Marc will want to, end up here, so I'll just put my last little.
Well, it was a great segue to sign off on that. That was beautiful, Chad.
Yeah, so that you don't have to ask me again if I have any final words, Marc, I'll just say them now, and I will say that first of all, thank you, and I really mean that, Chad. You are a masterful communicator. Your words are almost like poetry. I'm not trying to fawn over you. I really felt that you explain this stuff so clearly, and you clearly, it's coming from experience, obviously. It's not speculation or anything like that. So, and it is an important medicine, and it is, as I said, a kind of a ball of fire one is holding in one's hand. So it needs to be understood carefully, and you are doing a masterful job of that. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that. Not everybody can articulate what really can't be described. We all try, and some of us have ways in which we can do that so it can be transmitted to others. I believe that I have an angle on that, and that's why it is my joy and my honor to share what I can in the way that I can. And I'm so happy that it lands in you, and I hope it lands for many others.
Yeah, I really agree with Stephen in the way you described it. And, having had the experience that you really put words to something I've always, been at odds. And, as Stephen knows me well enough, I'm usually not at a loss for words. But it's that whole thing. It's like, how do you explain to someone what a rose smells like if they haven't smelled a rose? Right. And that's right. I thank you for doing just such a beautiful job for those who haven't smelt that rose, or even for those who have and haven't been able to describe it.
Right.
And, I look forward to your talk at the upcoming Spirit Plant Medicine Conference. I'm sure it's going to be equally as informative, and I'd love to even dive deeper because you obviously have so much to share. Maybe tell the folks how they can, again, your website, how they can get a hold of you if they want to learn more, do some work with you. Let them know where they can find you.
Sure. The website is chadcharles.net. Now, I do a few different things, not only what I call the breath of five, but breath of five is what I'm referring to here with 5-MeO-DMT, five, breath. We're taking it in with our breath. It's also in the Bufo Alvarius, and I also use that. And so that's why I use that. There is a password to enter that site, and it is the word one, small case, O-N-E. And from there, the journey begins. If you want to work directly with me, awesome. There's a link there where we have a call. You fill out a form. Let's get to know each other. If you want to make sense of an experience that you've already had, I love to make sense of that with you and for you. There's another link to book that call. And if there's something that you want to go, if you don't work with me, maybe you're in another country and yet you want to, is this right for me? What kind of practitioner do I want or need? There's a link there too that you can get in touch with me. I love this, and I love supporting people going towards the one.
You mentioned the information on the conclave that might be good for people looking to do this work. How do they access that?
Thank you. Go to theconclave.info, not conclave.info. That will go somewhere totally different, but theconclave.info, and go to the synopsis of the best practices. You don't need the best practices. That's more for practitioners, but the synopsis is this shorter form, condensed version with the type of questions you will find instrumental in finding the right practitioner for you.
Great.
Beautiful.
Take it away, Marc.
Well, again, Chad, I thank you so much. Look forward to your talk in just a couple of short weeks. My name is Marc Caron with Conscious Living Radio, Spirit Plant Medicine Conference, and all things transformation with my good friend Stephen Gray, a co-host, author, brilliant guy. I'm happy to, know you, Stephen, and consider you a good friend of mine. And, I'm just, humbled on this path of work that we do. Sharing everybody else's work in terms of, finding that better everyday life for everyone, for healing, growth, transformation, spiritual awareness, awakening, whatever that might be for whatever people are looking for. I thank you all for joining us today, and I look forward to a great conference coming up.
Sounds like your dog Rocky wants attention here too.
He does. Well, it's been one of those days.
Thank you, gentlemen. I loved it.
Good.
Awesome, guys. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye,
Cheers.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.